How's your mind doing, dear? Is it evil?
Damn, you already know the answer to that question.
The mind of evil!
The answer is yes, Gamb.
56. Mind of evil. It's be mindful of your evilness. It's mindfully evil. Evil is in the mind.
Yes.
What happens in this episode, dear?
Well, evil things, for one.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, the Doctor and Joe are driving up to a castle. It used to be a fortress, and now it's just a prison. And they're also like, hey, we're on camera, haha, and the cops are like, what the fuck are you? Oh, your unit, go ahead. And it's a prison, and it's really, really loud. And a man named George, i.e. also to be known as Cheekbones, is being sentenced to something. And we see the Doctor in a room full of people for science, for the Keller process, or something. There's no executions now. They just remove evil impulses, supposedly, from the brain, and they have 65% full evil impulses. We see a man,
69.
the man from earlier, Cheekbones, pulled in, put in the chair. He does a scream when the machines turn on, and the dial's like, wow, this guy's really evil, and he's dead. But with the malfunction, everyone's really sweaty, and the Doctor thinks that this machine's really bad. The guy actually isn't dead, but the Doctor gets a phone call, and meanwhile there's an accident in the processing room that they were in. Someone is actually dead. He looks really scared, and he's covered in bites and scratches and stuff. Also, meanwhile, there's a world peace conference going on, and there's also a missile. So there's 3 parts to this story. We have the prison, we have the missile, and we got the peace conference. And apparently there's some documents stolen from the Chinese military, and all this stuff. And then this lady just leaves and then burns some paper in a nearby park and twitches a whole bunch while doing so. And we notice she has an AirPod implanted in her chest, or not her chest, her neck. Sorry. And they realize the post-mortem of that one dude says that he dies of heart failure, but he didn't have a weak heart. He only had a fear of rats. And then the Doctor storms out. Yeah. The Brigadier, fucking hell, is trying to figure out what happened. And then the lady from earlier, her name is Chin Lee, I believe. Lee calls in, and apparently her delegate is dead. And then the bad thought box is flashing while the one guy in the room has his head hurt a whole lot, and then he imagines swimming and dies. That's weird. The machine's getting stronger, though. He also died from drowning. That's weird. Lee didn't tell anyone else about the death, apparently, and went and instantly called the Brigadier. And he was like, and he checks it out, and her phone call was actually 30 minutes later. So that's weird. Haha, she's fucked now. And the guy, Cheekbones, finally wakes up. He feels good. His memory's hazy. But he's good. Also, there's a riot going on, and the Doctor's in the room with the bad brain machine going off, and he's thinking about being on fire. Like the actual Doctor, like time travel Doctor. Yeah, he's thinking about being on fire. Anyway, that was the episode.
What an episode it is. What an episode. So, I'm gonna say straight up, this is Katie Manning, who played Joe Grant's favourite episode. She thinks it's her favourite episode. But this episode was one that was initially completely lost. Then they found black and white recordings of it because the BBC, in order to send it over to some other countries when they ordered it, they only wanted black and white prints, so they managed to still have the black and white prints. So for the DVD release, they manually recolored it. Especially episode 1 needed to be actually manually recolored because they weren't able to do the material to do the proper chroma dot restoration or whatever it was. I'm not too familiar with the way that they color things, but yeah, that's why this episode looks a little off, because it is colored in an odd way.
I thought it was fine.
But that's why,
except for like the TV static parts.
That's why at the end of episode 6 you get bonus credits, sort of like, hey, these are the people that saved this episode. So that's great. This we're going to be talking a lot about prisons and prison reform as we go through, so get ready for that. But I will quickly state, originally they wanted to do use an actual prison for this, but they couldn't find one that was available, mainly because like if they got an actual jail that wasn't in use, like, or like a jail that they could use and just, you know, do what they could with it, it's like, well, they don't really want people with guns, even if they're fake guns or like prop guns, like in a jail like that, because it's like you don't know what could happen. So they ended up using an actual castle, which is why it looks more like a castle, and why they reference it constantly as like, it's a fortress, it's a maximum security prison. No, it's just a castle. Which is why, you know, the set of the actual prison looks a little bit janky, and you see everything wobbling because it's just a set. But yeah, what happens in the next episode, dear?
Well, Joe comes in and stops him from dying.
Oh.
And that's cool, because she apparently distracted the brain thing enough for the thing to break, and he's like, the world was burning. There were many things I was remembering. And the doctor's like, I'm going to try to control their machine, but then the brig is commanding for him to come see him, and he's like, I don't want to go. And then he does actually go. And Joe is told to stay behind, hang out, talk to the governor. Lee, meanwhile, is on the phone in a phone booth nearby talking to someone, gets a splitting headache. Yeah. Should I not just go with Lee?
Just say Chinley, because it's her name.
Okay, well. Gets a splitting headache, and then the person that is following her also almost dies. And we see a weird overlay of the brain machine on top of her, and she walks away. And then the doctor comes in, Yates leaves, a man in a circus tent is fucking with some wiring nearby. Then he takes off his face, and it's the master, who's listening into everything now. And then the doctor gets to the brig to ban the Keller process, so long as the doctor helps him figure out the case. And he's like, as whatever you say, as long as you do what I want. And then there's going to be a Jeep escort thing tomorrow, and now the master knows that the doctor's here. And then the doctor walks in and speaks Chinese very fluently to the person at the desk, and the person at the desk gets really excited and goes, wow, all these fucking white people around here. No one talks to us in my native language. And he's like, yeah, like, sure. You want to go have some tea? Yeah, sure. And the brig is just sitting there like, what is happening? And apparently the doctor has talked to Mao himself and become friends.
Yeah, he's friends with Mao Zedong. Yeah. Oh, you know, they're such good friends. They have nicknames for each other. Yeah. I do love that scene.
Back at the prison, they're cleaning up cells, and Brain Machine is going off while Cheekbones is awake, and he's apparently forgotten a bunch of stuff, even his name. And the doctor's like, it seems to have taken literally all the negative everything out of his brain, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not. He literally has no evil in his brain. Meanwhile, a janitor hides a fucking gun under a pillow, and then they bring a man into that room, and that's great. And then the desk man is still only talking to the doctor, and then they order dinner, and then they leave. And the brigadier is still, like, trying to figure it out, and they're not talking to him. Meanwhile, the man in the prison pulls a gun on the guy who takes his lunch order in order to escape. Apparently, Chin Lee, the assistant, was the assistant of the man at the prison. So now the doctor's like, "How that's weird." And then she meets the master, and he does a mind control thing on her, and he's like, "Kill the American delegate," and she's like, "Oh, okay." And then there's a prison break happening, and they have hostages. Joe is one of them. The brig now knows where Chin Lee is. We see her calling the American delegate, going, "Hey, come talk to us, hang out with us," and he's like, "Ah, sure." And then she turns off the lights and turns into a dragon, and that was the episode.
Okay, so there's a lot about this specific part of the episode that I love talking about. So, first of all, for a kind of rare thing in the early 70s, the Asian characters were actually portrayed by Asian actors.
Yeah.
And it's
you don't
not
even
because,
see
like,
that nowadays.
No, you don't. It's not because they were like, "Oh, we need to have authentic, like, we need to be respectful." It's because the director was like, "I fucking hate actors in yellowface. It looks so unrealistic. Can we just get, like, actual Asian actors to do actual Asian roles? Like, yellowface looks so... It doesn't look real. Like, can we just, like, get people to actually portray themselves?"
Yeah.
So it's, like, accidentally anti-racist? Okay, so the second bit that I love... So, Christopher Kum, who played Fu Peng, who was the one behind the desk that ignored the Brigadier the entire time. So he was not the original actor for Fu Peng, but something went down on a location shoot, and the original actor got fired. And this guy came in to essentially, fill the role. He put himself forward to fill the role. Although, something that was a little bit of a problem was that he was kind of inappropriate for the role because the role required a Hokkien speaker, and he only natively spoke Cantonese. But Chin Lee was a Hokkien speaker, but in the episode she's speaking Cantonese. So it's
yeah,
like,
I was gonna say,
if they were in the opposite roles, it would have been perfectly fine. But the funny thing was, it was too late for them to change, like, the dialects around, because, like, John Pertwee had already been spending weeks. Also, I feel it's obvious because Doctor Who doesn't, like, shit the bed on this, but, like, the language, the actual language that they're speaking in it is authentic. Like, you can translate it to be English, and it's not, like, gibberish, like, racist gibberish. Oh,
yeah,
this is
like,
definitely what Cantonese sounds like.
The very little bit of, like, Mandarin I know, / Cantonese, just from, like, watching foreign films, I was just like, oh, they're, like, actually... It's, like, actually dialect.
Yeah, John Pertwee actually spent a few weeks, like, actively trying to learn the lines phonetically, because he wanted it to sound authentic.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is it was too late for them to change it, because if they changed it, then he'd have to learn a completely different dialect for it. So I was like, okay, we're just going to teach this actor phonetically how to, like, his lines as well. So it's like, it's an amazing scene where it's like, neither of them are speaking the language that they actually learned, and it's, like, kind of funny to me. But they pull it off well, and you know what, it's, considering everything else around this time in the 70s, like, surprisingly holds up very, very well. Like, this episode could have gone horribly wrong.
Oh, yeah. No. Especially with, like,
was,
the mention of, like, Mao and all that. Just like, oh my god.
Oh, true, but you have to remember, sort of, like, the depictions of Mao were very different to the way that we would depict him now.
Oh, no,
wait
I
till
know.
we get to fucking...
But I'm saying, like there's the off chance that, like, it could either go very skewed one way or the other, and it kind of didn't do either, and I was just like, alright.
It's kind of just like, yeah, I know him. He's my friend.
Yeah. And then they were, like, really excited to hear about him, and they were like, cool. So.
Cool. But yeah, it's also one of the rare times where subtitles are actually displayed on the screen for a real world language. Because most of the time it's, like, assumed that the TARDIS translation circuits are naturally, translating everything for everyone. So it's like, you don't need subtitles because everyone's speaking English, but in actual fact they're speaking Latin or French or German. Like, but it's like, sometimes, very rare occasions, I think they really just wanted to flex back then. They're just like, you know what, we're gonna fucking do it. Because, like, the entire point of that scene is the Doctor shows him respect and, like, shows that he actually cares about his culture and his people and knows about, you know, like, proper protocol and everything. Whereas the Brigadier's just like, hi, I want to talk to you about this. We need to figure out, like, what we're doing with security. And it's like, no, you're not showing him any respect, Brig. You're just being an asshole. So it's like, it kind of, you need that extra, you need to have that sort of, like, separation. It wouldn't work if they were all just speaking English. But anyway, what happens in the next episode?
So, sorry. The Brigadier runs in, shoots his gun, and Shinli falls over. But apparently everybody saw the dragon, and that's weird. And the American Senator's not dead, but he's in shock. And she was wearing a telepathic amplifier, which came... the telepathic stuff came from the Keller machine. And then the desk guy is good with letting the Doctor figure out what's going on. And then the Doctor's like, hey, talk to me, lady, and then starts to speak Cantonese to her. And then at the prison, the phones are still down, and they use the PhD doctor, I should clarify, because there's 2 doctors in this fucking episode, to send a message to the governor. And then Joe takes a nap. And then that missile is headed into the ocean, is still on its way, but it's running late, and the Brigadier is napping. And... napping. The Master's listening in, though, and heads to the prison. Chin-Li can't seem to remember what happened at the prison, and the Doctor goes, oh, duh. And the governor, meanwhile, doesn't want to concede to the prison, so they're probably all gonna get shot. Cheekbones comes down in the riot, and everyone's like, what the fuck? And then Joe does this whole thing where she, like, kicks a guy, makes him shoot himself, takes his gun, and turns the tides. And then the Master...
she single-handedly turns it and saves everyone.
Yeah. And then the Master shows up to talk to the governor, and then the riot leader next, and he gives him another weapon. Riot leader is, of course, the guy who pulled the gun in the first place and is breaking out. I forget his name. We'll get to that. So another riot is now happening, but now with chemicals and gas masks and guns. And then the Master puts a controller thing on a phone, and the Doctor is at the prison currently, and he's let inside. And then someone literally just puts a gun in his face, and he's like, I was going in already. You don't have to do that. And then they now meet face to face, and the Master has a gun, but he also needs help with missile theft. So the Doctor makes a distraction by flipping the table and spilling some water, and then there's a gunfight and a chase scene. And then the Doctor is in the main room getting handcuffed to the bad brain machine chair because he's caught. And he he takes the mind control dot back from the Doctor, puts it on him, and he's like, this is going to make it worse, and turns the machine on and leaves. And then we see more fire and a little bit of Daleks in there, and then that's the episode. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is literally what he did.
Yeah. So, fun fact, that scene where, like, all the aliens and stuff from his memory appear, could have been much worse. Originally, there was going to be, like, sensorites and a kind of innocuous robot from an episode we skipped. And, like, Quillian, and it's like, these things didn't really scare the Doctor, but whatever. But
the only thing I can imagine is that he can't remember them at this point still. Like, he still doesn't have his memories, right? So it's just these things
he has his memories. He doesn't have memories of how to fly the TARDIS.
I thought he was still trying to remember some things, and they only came in bits and pieces at a time. I don't know.
No, I mean, well, plot convenience-wise, yes. But,
okay, well...
like, his memories of his past adventures he remembers.
Okay, because I was just gonna say, well, maybe he doesn't remember what they are, and, like, the terror from what they first gave was too much. I don't know. Anyway.
Yes. Anyway. How are you doing?
Meh.
Meh.
We had a deep, heartfelt conversation just before this podcast, so meh.
I mean, that's true, we kind of did. So, with the American delegate, with that entire scene of, hey, killing the American delegate, the production team jokingly called the Chinese dragon to which Chin Li appears to look like, they jokingly called it Puff the Magic Dragon, because it looked really unconvincing.
You don't say!
Obviously, after the song, the 1960 song by Peter, Paul, and Mary. Subsequently, the director was like, you know what, we'll only use, like, brief shots of it then. Just, like, if even the production staff are like, oh yeah, this is real scary, we'll just not use it, because it's, like, it's not really worth it at all. I'm going to start planting the seed here, because this is a very, very long conversation of, we have, like, in order to give you context of, like, where this episode comes from, we need to explain where prison reform was in the 1970s. It was during a time where prisoner rehabilitation had sort of moved from a societal issue to a lot of people were considering it a medical issue. Like, hey, maybe there is something medically wrong with them that makes them evil. That's sort of like the quote-unquote evil gene type shit. Which led to a whole heap of, like, secret experiments, dosing people with, like, ADHD drugs. LSD, yes, the famous one in the 1950s.
Yep.
Supposedly, some of these haven't been disproven, which means it's, like, it could have an air of truth to it, but it also couldn't. There's also, like...
Yeah, and eating an apple a day could make you healthier, but nothing says it doesn't.
I mean, eating an apple a day does make you healthier, but it doesn't keep a doctor away unless you throw it at them.
You know what I mean,
though. But that's mainly American prison reform. British prison reform had sort of been happening over the last century and a bit, where it's like, you know, they had stopped sending people to Australia. They sort of were under the condition of, oh, hey, the threat of sending people to another country has worked. Like, it's a real good deterrent. But, you know, actually following through and sending people away costs so much fucking money that it's like, we can't really do this anymore. Then there's, like, all sorts of things of, like, inhuman practices were outlawed in... I'm not going to get into what they were, just know that they were inhumane. Arguing that, like, hey, like, prison itself is a deterrent. But, like, all these things wrap into, like, what makes someone go to prison? Like, is it something medical, or is it something societal? And people were going back and forth on the issue. And this was sort of a story on that in a sense, but we'll get more into it later.
Story of a girl.
It's the story of a girl who cried a river and shat her pants. Next episode.
And reform the entire prison system. So, the doctor just passes out, and all the men in the prison are in mind pain. And then the master goes back to figure out what's up, shuts the machine off, checks the doctor's hearts. One isn't beating. So he slaps him very gently.
As you do.
Yeah. And the doctor's alive again. And then the master needs him to help control the bad brain, the jar thing. And so the doctor's thrown in with Joe. And then we threaten Joe with bad brain too. Joe asks for help and they go, well, too bad. The brain jar is almost full, so fuck you. The brain jar is fighting with the master, though, trying to control back and forth, and then he hallucinates the doctor. And then the PhD doctor helps the doctor because he's in a coma. And he's okay. He just wants a nappy nap. But he's dead. Yeah. And then the jailbreak guy wants to know why he and the master don't just leave. And he's like, well, I want the missile. And they're like, okay. And then it's the next morning. Joe wants food. And the doctor sits up like, hey, what's up? And the Doctor and Joe break out by throwing their breakfast on the floor. And then the heist for the missile is happening. Ooh, effects and things. They're not in radio contact. And then Gamb took notes while I pooped. Your notes are always far more detailed than mine.
Well, because it's like, when you take notes, you know exactly what you don't want to, exactly what you need to remember things. So it's like, I write more detailed stuff because I don't know exactly what you need to remember.
Basically, they steal the missile, and they also steal Yates. There's 5 lines here, but that's what happens.
Okay, they don't... Whatever.
They steal the missile, and they also kidnap Yates.
They don't kidnap him. He goes after them.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, I'll go get help. And then they're like, no, you're not. And he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, no, they run him over, basically. And he's captured. Anyway... The Brigadier can't get any information from this other soldier, but he was like, there was a black van, police van. Oh, from the prison. Yeah, of course. And then the Doctor wants to deal with the alien inside of the Keller machine. It's very deadly and a parasite. But then the Master's suddenly leaving the prison, and the Keller machine, meanwhile, teleports outside of the room and makes a man fall over, and then leaves to go somewhere else. And then it tries to mind control everyone in another room and teleport back to the fucking table. And then it leaves because it's needing to chase Mailer, who is the jailbreak dude, because he has so much evil that it really, really wants to eat it. Cheekbones is back and they take him in, and you're like, you're coming with us. Brigadier's in a helicopter. Joe and the Doctor get fucking captured again.
The Joe.
Mailer is getting cranky at Master for all the shit that's happening. Yates, the hostage, is going to be used as a hostage. And so the Master needs him to stay here so he can use him as leverage. The Prison Break is trying to get the Doctor to give him an offer to betray Master, and he's like, yeah, it's not good enough. The Brigadier is going to look for the secret underground MacGuffin tunnel to get everybody in. And then the Master goes to talk to the Doctor, and they're playing checkers, and Joe wins because the Doctor's an idiot. And then the Master still wants the Doctor's help. In order to save Joe, they need to stop the machine together, or else Joe dies. Yates escapes, meanwhile, and the Doctor is building a ring of wire and plugs, and it's going to confuse the machine into not moving. And he sneaks into the room, throws the ring, they start up the machine, and it works. Cool. Back to the prison cell now. And then the Doctor's really tired, and they eat some floor bacon together and water, and talk about potatoes. And then the Brig shows up to the prison with a bunch of shoulders sneaking out of the van. He sneaks in the front gate, too. Knocks out the guards, drives straight in. There's a gunfight. The entire army is here. However, Prison Break is using Joe and the Doctor to avoid getting killed. And then the Doctor maybe gets shot? I don't know. That's the episode.
That's the episode? Yeah, that's it. You're done?
Mm-hmm. What part did I skim over that you were upset about? All of it?
No. Yes. Okay, so, oh boy. A lot of this, God, there is so many paragraphs written on, where this comes from, and I'm just, ripping out pages. It's like, we're not talking about this, we're not talking about this, we're not talking about this, because it's this. Too much. Essentially, it all kind of started off with, the US committing a few no-nos during wartime. Doing some illegal stuff, and essentially the way that they were basically deemed blameless for it, because they all actually had the exact same story and were reasoned to be doing the right thing. Glossing over so many things right now. But essentially it started people thinking about, well, okay, what makes something wrong? What makes someone doing something wrong? how do you know that someone has done something wrong? Like, what? And this is, like, where it all started going towards, hey, maybe the pharmaceutical industry can solve, like, our prison crisis and, like, evilness. So, you know, drugs were wonder drugs to produce to cure everyone of everything. All sorts of fucking quack shit to be like, hey, yeah, we can cure everything. It's no coincidence that Barnum, who dubbed Cheekbones, when he's first gone through the machine, he kind of mimics the look of he's just had a lobotomy, which was, you know, outlawed in the 50s in the Soviet Union when it was, contravened because of the principles of humanity, which, you know, is kind of funny. But that makes the episode itself kind of interesting because you've got all these different medical techniques going through to solve a prison problem when it's, like, very clearly throughout the episode the problem is the approach that people are taking towards solving the issue. Yeah. It's like, yes, using this machine appears to cure this patient, but it also appears to lobotomize him. It seems incredibly inefficient, and also the machine itself, the process of using it, has essentially killed so many people.
But keep using it.
Yeah, I know, right? This is where you get, like a more in-depth sort of analysis of this, like, medical versus societal is obviously more present in the much better sort of movie, because it's solely about it, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and the book, of course. Which, if you haven't seen it, still a great movie. Jack Nicholson's great in it.
I actually watched it last year, I want to say.
What's Nurse Ratchet's...
Oh, God. Louise Fletcher?
I hate the... Louise Fletcher, that's it.
Yeah.
Also, did you know they're making a fucking prequel show about Nurse Ratchet? And it's like
actually watched it,
horror show,
and it's
fucking awful.
I actually watched it. It kind of is trying to make her out to be not terrible, or as terrible.
What the problem with it is that, like... Okay, this is going to be a mini thing on, like, the entire point of Nurse Ratchet. The entire point of Nurse Ratchet in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is that she's a benign evil.
Yes.
She is not, like, comically evil. She is just doing her job, and she believes that this is the way to cure these people. Like, it is borderline inhumane the way she treats the patients, but to her and to society as a whole, she is actually doing a net good for society, because she is curing these people. And, well, quote-unquote curing. But it's like, she's not like this evil mastermind, like, horror icon, which the fucking trailers for that show kept putting it out.
So what they actually try to make her be, because I've watched it, I was interested and bored at the same time. It basically turns her into, like, wow, all these things we're doing are so horrible, we shouldn't do any of them. We need to find real ways to take care of people. Wow. Oh, I should probably go get a job at that prison over there and take care of people. And it's just like, what? She literally uses lobotomies to, like, murder people in that fucking show to save her psychotic brother, who's not really her brother, because they apparently had the major spoilers for that fucking show, I guess. They had
Don't watch it, but
childhood trauma for it, like, together, and because of that, she needs to do anything to save him, but he's also a fucking murderer, so she goes and works at the mental hospital he's in to save him, but then also a whole bunch of gay women come in that they literally boil alive in some cases, and she's like, no, this is so inhumane, but then lobotomies happen, and she's like... That's science right there. And it's just so fucking, like, it feels like two totally different things. Ugh. Anyway.
Yeah. But real quick also, I'm not going to get into it because we've already gotten into it with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but obviously the British equivalent of The Clockwork Orange, which is a more stylized version of the kind of a similar story of criminal reform and the treatment of it. But, this episode is kind of... That's what this episode is kind of about. It's essentially a
also, if you haven't seen Clockwork Orange, it's really good.
Also a Clockwork Orange, if you haven't seen that.
Yeah, that's what I... Just... What?
You said a Clockwork Orange.
Fuck off.
What happens in the next episode, Tia?
God, nothing, because you're making fun of me.
If I don't make fun of you, who will?
Everybody else!
Exactly, so I have to get in first.
God damn it. So it was actually the Brigadier who shot the guy taking them hostage, so everyone's safe. But the missile's not here, so that's bad. But at the missile, the Master's, like, ready to go. And Cheekbones and Yate comes in on the radio, and the machine has broken out of the ring and is getting dangerous. And Benton gets a promotion, and the Doctor's stressed the fuck out. And the machine is loose.
Okay.
What?
Promotion to what? What does Benton get promoted to?
A governor in... whatever? He basically is, like, in power.
Acting governor.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Of the prison. The machine is loose. It teleports away and is taking people out again. Left and right. Blat, blat. And then the PhD doctor calls and Cheekbones wants to talk to him. And so he leaves. And then the machine teleports its way into the room to kill Joe and the doctor. But Cheekbones is here, though, and it stops when he gets close. But then he remembers some things and tries to run away, and it hurts them again. So if they keep him nearby, because he has no evil things in his brain, he's safe. But the machine is now open, and apparently the little dude inside would take a nuke to kill in his jar. And the Doctor is with Benton, and they're talking, and then the Master calls, and he's like, okay, well, listen, I'll give you this circuit that I took if you go away. And he's like, you know what? Sure. Also, don't fire the rocket. Okay, sure. And then they're like, okay, I'll see you here. And then the Doctor gets a call to the brig, and the brig goes, oh, but we could just still kill him, just like a little bit, right? The Doctor's like, no. And then the Doctor doesn't actually want to give him the circuit because then they're going to lose him to space and time, and that would suck. So they're going to use the bad brain machine. And we see the Master taking out the abort mechanism for the rocket so that he can't be stopped. And then they try to blow up the missile, apparently, and it didn't work. Time for plan B. The Doctor stalls for time for a while talking to him, and then they basically take Cheekbones and the jar and move him really close to the Master, and then, like, kind of just put the jar on the ground and run away. So, and they also push the Master over, actually. And the Doctor fixes the abort thing being missing. They all get on a helicopter, but then Cheekbones tries to help the Master up, fucking up the entire plan, because, of course, he has no, bad in him. He's a saint. And then he gets run over by the Master. So then the missile area and the missile itself are all blown up, so everything's good, right? Everybody's dead, everything's good. And then the Doctor realizes, oh no, I actually lost that circuit. Where could it be? And then a phone call comes in, and he's like, hey, I found my circuit. See ya. And then the Doctor has a huge emotional moment about how he's stuck here on Earth, and the Master is doing other shit. And that was the episode.
Well, and then the fucking Master calls him up and is like, hey, just thought I'd tell you, I'm still alive. I'll destroy the planet one day, but you know what, maybe I'll just leave you all alone. But also, enjoy your exile, by the way. And then the Doctor's just like, fucking piece of fucking shit, fucking hate you.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's it. And then the Master's never seen again. That's it. He's completely gone. Real quick, extra names for this episode were originally Man Hours, Doctor Who and Pandora's Box, and the Pandora Machine. So that to give you extra, put into words the fact that the Keller machine is meant to be negative shit inside of its whole thing. Yeah. What are you thinking? What are you thinking?
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking you thought it was like a 6 or a 7.
Higher.
Really? You liked it more than that? I will say this was an episode where I noticed that you weren't sort of like... I feel like around like episode 5, I sort of noticed you hadn't realized how much time had passed. And I was like, this is a really good sign.
Yeah.
Alright, what is it then?
Like an 8.
Okay.
That's if I'm gonna get into like decimals, we're at like 8.4.
We're not getting into decibels,
we're
but you know what?
We're almost at like rounding up to a 9.
Well, welcome to the 70s, because like a lot of episodes are like this. So
I mean, my biggest thing is I just wasn't bored, and like there are some things that I'm just like, oh come on, just do this, just do that, because there was a situation where they were being held at gunpoint and walked out, but the guy with the gun goes first. So my first thought would be, close the door. It's a giant iron door, right? He's a weak little dude, like a skinny-ass guy.
Little boy.
He just has a gun. That's the only problem. So 2 of you, one who's military trained and one who's like a tall male, could basically hold that door closed, and it's a big iron door. He's not going to be able to, like, open it. Just, like, little things like that, but I don't know. It didn't bug me that much. It wasn't like, this is how atoms work. They turn into water sometimes and change their properties, and it's just like, you don't say.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you liked it, because like this sort of format for a lot of episodes is like a lot of what's upcoming, and like there's obviously changes. They're not all the same type of episode, but like I was kind of worried, because this is probably the one where I'm like, this is probably the weakest of the upcoming ones.
I mean, the subject matter was also something that I was just like down for, so
true. But yeah, you understand what I mean when I'm saying like, welcome to the 70s, welcome to the subtle political era of Doctor Who, where it's like, it's not like again, they weren't allowed to be like hardcore left wing, fuck the government, fuck the conservatives sort of deal. They could only do, and they only wanted to do, baseline societal issues like environmentalism, prison reform, mental illness, all these sorts of things that, like, again, Terrence Dicks and Barry Letts, they're especially Terrence Dicks, his sort of belief was that an episode, in order to be interesting and in order to last and to make people want to think about it more, is that it has to be a good story, and it has to have a message. If it doesn't have a message, then like people are going to forget and not care about the story. Which is why this is the start of when Doctor Who gets really good, and also it's the reason why Doctor Who's ratings got even higher, and they survived the slump of season 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was The Mind of Evil. Next week, The
I have
Claws
something
of
to add.
Axos. What are you adding?
I am blaming you. I hate you. So...
yeah, we should say this on the podcast.
Do you want to, or me?
No, you can.
Okay. We were having a moment in stream where, I don't even remember what it was, during Draw Pile, where we were talking about the French Revolution because we were talking about guillotines. And the first fucking thing that came to mind was the French Revolution episode of Doctor Who. And it pissed me off so badly that was the first thing that came to mind. You are literally in a cordyceps in my brain is what you are, Gamb, and I'm so sick of it already. Like, I would like to be able
love
to
it.
pull from multiple libraries in my brain when it comes to referencing things, not just Doctor Who.
Oh god, I'm just like looking at the next few episodes that we've got to go through, and it's like a lot of these are going to stick in Deer's mind, I think, for times to come, and then Deer will think back of like, oh yes, this period in history. Oh, that's right. And it's like we'll get to the 80s, and it'll be like, oh yes, H.G. Wells. I remember the episode with him and the time corridor and that weird lizard monster, the Loch Ness monster. Wait till we get to that. Multiple times. But yeah, that's the Mind of Evil. Claws of Axos next week. That's a very interesting one. But yeah, we'll see you next week, unless of course you don't want to listen in next week, which okay.
Or I murder you.
We're not,
one of the two.
We're not your dads. You can
not you, reader, listener, Gamb.
Reader,
listener.
Reader.
Hey, Gamb. Hey, Gamb.
Yes, dear.
Fuck you.
Yeah. Alright, well, see you later. Goodbye.
Fuck you.
Wow, you're saying fuck you to the audience?